I've realized that some of my parenting style has been more rooted in revenge and resentment, right? So I've been thinking through this theory of revenge parenting. How much of your decision to be right, to do right, to tap into this masculine vulnerability is showing people in your past that in spite of I'm going to be this, and how much of it is natural, genuine desire to just be better.
I think that most of it comes from a place that says that this is necessary for my emotional well-being and the emotional well-being of the people around me, you know? And so I think for me, it's not really even for other people, right? Like it's mostly for me.
Yeah.
You know, because I want to be the best version of a man that I can be, you know? Now, I will say that seeing my parents' marriage fall apart caused me to go on a journey before I got married that said, marriage is not really important right now, until it became important to me.
All right, let's get it, man. Welcome to the Dear Son Show, where we have meaningful conversations about life through the lens of fatherhood most of the time. Things are a little bit different on this episode. Actually, it's an ode to how it started. It was guest-driven at first, and it saved my life because I was tired of hearing me speak. But tonight we got a fantastic guest, because that's all I've ever done is fantastic guests. So you're in for a treat. You don't have to listen to just me. Nate Cotman, welcome to the Dear Son Show. How are you, my brother?
Man, it's good to be here.
Man, it's good to have you here.
It's an honor to be here.
And I received that.
Yes.
I received that, man. How you feeling, man?
I feel good.
Good.
I feel good. You know what I'm saying? I feel like I'm in a good space.
Yeah. Good space, good energy.
Yeah, for sure.
Always want to make sure the guests are actually doing well, not the surface. Not the surface.
Yeah.
So when you say you good, that means you're good.
That means I'm good. That means
great.
That means I'm at peace. That means that I'm aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At peace. That's I don't know if it's still a buzzword, but protect your peace, don't disturb the peace and all of that. Yeah. What does that peace look like for you?
Yeah. I think for me, it looks like alignment. Right. There have been, seasons of my life where I didn't feel aligned. I didn't feel aligned with my purpose. I didn't feel aligned with my my destiny.
Gotcha.
Right. So for me, it feels like alignment. It doesn't mean that things are perfect, but it means that that I'm where I need to be.
Yeah.
Right. No drama, no chaos. You know what I'm saying?
This isn't the platform for that anyway.
Yeah. No major stressors. Things are well.
Yeah. So we'll get into your story, man. This is, for the newcomers, this is Nate's second time on the platform. He joined a panel style event that we did several months ago.
Yeah.
Very, very impactful. I think a lot of relationships were born out of that.
Yeah.
And thank you, number one.
Yeah,
make sure you get your flowers.
You brought us all together, man.
I'm a connector, man. I've accepted that.
Yeah.
Right. If there's anything that I'll tout is I'm a connector. My goal is to be behind the camera and create opportunities. But until then, we have conversations like this. So we'll probably still continue to have conversations, but my passion is to just create beautiful Black stories responsibly.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
So for those that didn't catch that part or have been living under a rock and haven't seen you viral on many platforms, how would you present yourself to others that don't know you?
Yeah, I would present myself as a servant, son, and friend, right? I would present myself as somebody who pioneers the concept of masculine vulnerability, which is something that I think for some men it's taboo.
Yeah.
But it's extremely necessary. I would consider myself to be an extremely transparent guy, and somebody who's accountable, right? And also pioneering that as well.
Yeah. So we'll get into all of that for sure.
For sure.
But let's kind of walk the story, man. Where you from?
I'm from Philly.
Philly.
Philly. Yep. I'm from North Philly. Um, I was born and raised in Philly until I was about 14, 15, and then I moved to New Jersey for a couple of years. Then I moved to Dallas when I was 16. But yeah, I still rep Philly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Early days, what was Philly like when you jumped off the porch? What was Philly like? What did you see?
You know what? Philly was fun.
Yeah.
Philly was fun. Back in those days, spent a lot of time outside, right? Played some video games, but spent a lot of my time outside. So riding bikes, playing basketball outside. Believe it or not, I was in the martial arts when I was younger, so I did some of that.
Yeah.
My dad actually, I think he was like a brown belt in Kung Fu growing up. So I developed that love for martial arts through him. He was also really good at flipping. He was like a gymnast when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
But he carried that on into his earlier years. So I used to grow up watching him flip for the kids in the neighborhood, in the yard, just stuff like that. So Philly was fun. Philly was chill. You know, the 90s, there was some, you know, I grew up in an impoverished neighborhood.
Okay.
I grew up in a neighborhood where there was a lot of drug activity and stuff like that. But I mean, on my block, it was fun, you know. Yeah. There was never a dull moment. Sometimes there were people outside fighting, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes a SWAT team would come in on a block. Just, you know, but it was a lot of fun.
Sounds like a movie at all times.
Yeah.
What was the your eyes kind of sparkled when you talked about your dad? I don't want to get to that, but help us understand what the family dynamic was. Who's in the house?
Yeah, for sure. So I told you all of that about my dad, right? But my dad was actually a pastor in Philly for 14 years. So he would kids from the neighborhood would come knock on the door and ask him, man, can you come outside? Can you flip for us? Different things like that. But yeah, the family dynamic was I had both my mom and my dad in the home.
Okay.
They were active in ministry growing up. So I grew up in the church.
Gotcha.
And I was in church every time the doors were open.
Gotcha.
So Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday for cleanup, or kids club, whichever one was going on. Noah's Ark kids club is what they had back in the day. So I spent a lot of time in church, spent a lot of time at home. You know, we would have family night once a week, just different things like that. So the dynamic was pretty cool. It was me, my mom, my dad, my sister growing up. So family of four.
Was being a church kid a burden, or was it just a natural part of the family flow?
That's a really good question. I would say it became a burden at times because sometimes church interfered with things that I really wanted to do.
You don't say.
You know what I'm saying? So I'll give you an example. Growing up, I played a lot of basketball. I remember being in middle school and I was on a basketball team. And I remember my parents saying, okay, you can play basketball, but on the nights that we have church, I don't care if there's a game going on or whatever the case may be. Yeah, you need to be in church. So imagine playing basketball and we have a game coming up and it's a Wednesday night and we have service on Wednesday night and I can't play. You know what I'm saying? Like my coaches didn't understand.
So here's what's interesting and deepens our bond right there. So I couldn't play. I grew up Seventh-day Adventist. I wasn't allowed to play on the Sabbath. But yours was a little bit deeper in that if there's a church event, you couldn't play. So my complaints are irrelevant at this point.
I mean, you probably had once a week, right?
Yeah, are irrelevant at this point. And to take it further, I was so annoyed at that because I didn't have a say in it. I was in their house, right? They have the rules, they make the rules, and what they say is what they say.
Right.
I felt like I should have a say in it.
Mm.
My dad did not. It wasn't even a conversation to really entertain. So I didn't even try out because I didn't want the embarrassment of not being able to play half of the games.
Mm-hmm.
Hindsight, I probably should have
right.
because it would have developed me and maybe the story would be a story.
Right.
Now I just have high basketball IQ and telling my son how to play and I have no tape.
Right, exactly.
You can't go on YouTube and figure out what I did.
Right.
How did that how did you negotiate that in your mind, loving basketball? Did you feel like it was taken away from you? Did you have resentment toward the church or church activities to God specifically? How
Yeah.
did that play out?
Yeah. So, I didn't have resentment. I think for me, it caused me to develop a deeper understanding of what I didn't want to do
Hmm.
if I happened to have a child who had a passion for a particular thing that may conflict with church. Um, I'm I'm of the understanding that even if, you know, something falls on the same day as church service, it doesn't mean that I'm putting that before God. It just means that it
Right.
falls on the same day. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Whereas I think in my parents' mind, they may have felt like I may have been prioritizing over something over God. And so for me, I don't believe that church and God are synonymous.
They're not. So, well, I agree. Right. And a friend of mine, actually, friends now, grew up in church with him. He was more like an older brother, like
Mm.
somebody that I envied, the cool guy,
Hmm.
had the Jordans, had the,
Hmm.
all of that. And he used to hoop with me, right? I always grew up hooping with people that were 6, 7, 10 years older than me. I was the little
Sure.
guy on the court, right? And he posted something about religion. And my response was that in my mind, the purpose of religion is to facilitate a deeper relationship with God that yields good fruit, right?
Mm.
The challenge that I have with all religions is man's influence on it,
Mm.
because sometimes tradition, rituals kind of supersede relationship. In my experience, right? I think you can have both. You can have religion and have a great relationship with God. But when you said church and God are not synonymous, I went to that in my mind, because I was good at understanding the religion, very limited experience with relationship
Mm.
until I got older. Until I got older.
There's actually when you said that, when you talked about basically man's involvement,
Mhm.
right? There's actually a verse that said, "There's nothing more powerful than the word of God than the needless traditions of men." That's actually a verse in the Bible, right? Um, I don't think that verse is saying that traditions are actually more significant than the word of God. I think that verse is saying that a lot of times people
Influence.
buy into the
Mhm.
traditions of men,
Yeah.
almost to the point where they make it more significant
Yeah.
than God's actual word,
Right.
right? I'm not saying at all that's what my parents did.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What I am saying is that sometimes we have to be careful when it comes to um, how we interpret what it means to be committed to God.
Mhm. I think relationship drives that. That's been my point, and that's been my journey over the last probably 5 to 7 years, the last couple more intensely,
Mhm.
is understanding how I interact with God and what
Mm.
He requires of me. Right. So that's not to turn this into a Bible study. That
Yeah,
wasn't the
no.
intent. But so yeah, let's get out of Philly. You went from Philly to Jersey. What was that jump like, and what drove that change?
Yeah, I think it was my parents when I was living in Philly, my parents were paying for private school for me and my sister.
Mm.
Okay, so um, they got to a point where they had to make a decision. They said, okay, look, we can continue to pay for private school for you and your sister, or we can just increase our mortgage,
Right.
right? Get a better house, but you'll be in a school district that won't require you to go to private school.
Right.
It'll be so basically when I moved to New Jersey, I ended up being in um, so the high school that I went to when I was in New Jersey was the number 2 high school, I believe, in the nation at the time.
What part of Jersey?
It
South?
was
Of,
it was South Jersey. It was a little town called Washington Township.
okay.
You familiar?
I know Willingboro. I know
Okay.
Marlton, Cherry
Okay.
Hill.
Have you heard of Glassboro before?
Nah.
Okay. So it's not too far from
Okay.
Willingboro, but so I ended up going there. We were in a better school system, and then we had a nicer house. So that transition was pretty nice.
Yeah, my dad came to the realization that private school wasn't yielding. Let me take that back. I was not taking advantage of private school as they thought I wasn't bearing the fruit, right? I wasn't a terrible kid, but I was but also why? You know what I mean? If you tell me to do something, why? Right? Not really bucking at authority, but something, if I didn't understand it, I didn't understand it.
Right.
And you were going to understand that from my tone and my posture.
Right.
So I went to public school, ninth grade, and the people there were confused because they didn't know me from middle school. Like I wasn't matriculating with a lot of people. So they didn't know I was in ninth grade. So I didn't get beat up, right? Because I went to ninth grade, I'm like 5'11",
Right.
probably 160, 170 pounds. So I looked different. And by the time people figured out, oh, you're supposed to pick on you. But it was a huge transition for me because I went from small schools to a sea of Black people,
Okay.
right? Just interacting, and it was, the adjustment for me was more, I wasn't overwhelmed, but I was just seeing things and people differently than I would see on a regular basis. What
Right.
was your transition from private to public school like?
I would say, yeah, that transition could be a bit overwhelming, right? Because in public school you get a little bit more of everything, right? So the school that I ended up going to in New Jersey was huge.
Mm.
I mean, compared to a small little private school, in Philly, yeah, the schools that I went to in New Jersey, they were huge,
Yeah.
right? Not only that, but there was a disparity in income, right? So my household income versus the income in the household of my peers, right? So I mean, you got kids pulling up to school in brand new Mercedes,
Mm.
BMWs, fancy cars, and it's like, I took the bus here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I would say that was a huge adjustment. Just kind of watching that.
Yeah. And then
Watching it
you
unfold.
moved to Dallas. How old were you when you moved to Dallas?
I was 16.
Okay, so you finished high school here
Finished
in
high
this
school
area?
here. Yeah.
Okay. What was that transition like? Because Dallas is very different from East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's almost like a you see East Coasting people when
Yeah.
you're here. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
no,
you're not from here.
you're
You're
not
not
from
from
here.
here.
I hated it. Yeah, I hated it. To me, when I moved here, so I moved here back in 2004. Dallas was a lot slower
Okay.
at that time than it is now, right?
Man, 2004, I was getting engaged.
Yeah.
So about high school.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
boy.
Yeah, no, for real. So that was tough. And to make it even worse, we actually didn't move to Dallas proper.
Okay.
We moved to Richardson.
Okay. Yeah.
So you go from Philly to Jersey, it's a suburb, right? But it's still really close to the city. If we want to go have fun or whatever the case may be, we can go right back to the city. Then I moved to Richardson. Richardson, it's not going to have a public transit system like Philly, New Jersey is going to have. So now I'm out here without a car. You know what I'm saying? Everything. So it was a tough transition for sure. I hated it when I initially moved out here.
Why'd you move here?
My parents felt like this is where they were called to be.
Okay.
So it was their decision to come out here and have a fresh start. Yeah.
So I want to get into what people on your platform clearly know you for, but I want to kind of walk how you landed in this space, right? So your what you champion is this concept, no disrespect, of masculine vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
How we get there?
That's a phenomenal question. So the pendulum, I would say the pendulum swung from one extreme to another. So for me, so I was married for 5 years.
Mm.
And in that marriage, I was not vulnerable. I was not transparent, right? I remember we divorced. And after that divorce, I began to go on this journey
Mhm.
Like, yo, I don't want I don't want to have secrets. I don't want to um, pretend. I don't want to fabricate. And so that journey began in me first, right? By me being transparent with the people that were around me,
Mm.
right? Fast forward, July of last year, my dad died. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I know that my dad died with some things in him, right? And so for me, I really wanted to put myself in a position not to die with things in me. And so he died in July, and August is when I began to post videos on Instagram, just sharing from my heart about a myriad of different things. Um, and sharing very transparently, you know. Um, and then I began to see how it began to affect people. They're like,
Mhm.
man, like this is something that we need. Thank you so much for being transparent. Thank you so much for being vulnerable. Um, I can definitely tell you that a lot of women appreciate it, but I could tell that a lot of men, you know, it wasn't something that was native to them. But I would have guys that would reach out to me in my DM, like, man, thank you so much for saying what I didn't have the courage to say. And what I began to realize is that although men have a desire to be vulnerable, they look at it as a sign of weakness, and so a lot of times they don't want to open up about their past, their fears, their struggles, their pain. Um, and I begin to realize, like, yo, this is what's necessary. This is what's necessary for me. It's therapeutic for me,
Mhm.
but in the process, it's also impacting um, other people. And so I just went on this journey of just sharing from my heart.
Well, you say men typically see it as a sign of weakness. I agree with that, but I also challenge the thought of, do we see it as a sign of weakness in us, or do we fear that others will see it as a sign of weakness in us?
Hmm.
Because like there's something inside of you that urges you, that compels you to be a thing,
Sure.
but you fight it.
Sure.
Right. And I don't know how much of that is fighting it because I believe I shouldn't be that way, or
Sure.
what will other people think?
Yeah. I think it could be a combination of both. Um, Sometimes when you do something that's not native to you, um, because it's new, it feels like a weakness, or you feel weak in it, right? Um, but then secondly, because of the conditioning of men, you know, through media, through various forms of media, or through things that may have been passed down. You know, you see a young boy, he's crying about something, and then a parent or someone in the family or someone around says, "Stop crying, because men don't cry." But now we're conditioning that boy um, to believe that if he cries, that's not a masculine trait, because that's not something that guys do. So without realizing it, we actually have been conditioned to believe that vulnerability, that the sharing of emotion, that admitting when we're wrong by expressing how we feel is a weakness.
Yeah.
And then so sometimes we adopt that as our identity,
Hmm.
you know?
So it's interesting that that don't cry as a command also teaches them that it's that easy to turn off.
Mm,
Like that's the muscle that we build through that command is, no, you can absolutely stop crying immediately right now because somebody told you to.
mm,
Then you tell yourself to, and you don't allow yourself to feel those feelings. I want to jump back to a little bit before um the 5-year marriage. What did you see in your home that prepared you or gave you a perspective of marriage that caused you to agree that you were ready to be married? Or were you? Because I might be putting I might be putting some.
I don't really know if it was what I saw in my home that made me decide that I
Mhm.
was ready to be married. I think it was what I saw in my life that made me feel like I was ready to be married. Right now, hindsight is 2020. I probably wasn't ready to be married at the
Right.
time, right? But because there were some things in me that I needed to work through, I believe, before I got married. Um, But I think I think that there were some things that I felt in my life, I would say,
Right.
um, that made me decide to get married.
Yeah. And the reason I ask that is because my parents just celebrated 50 years of marriage this year, a couple months ago.
Mm,
And I always saw the mechanics,
mm,
but I didn't really understand the journey
mm,
or the process.
mm,
So when I jumped into it, I'm comparing the where I am in my life and where they were in their life. So I should be ready by now
mm.
because that's what happened
Yeah.
with them. My sister kind of followed suit. And I'm not I'm not dismissing that I was madly in love with my wife. Still
Right.
am. And I
Right.
wanted to
Right.
marry
Right.
her. But you start to look at that timeline, you start to, I think we naturally start to compare timelines. And especially if you saw something that you think was successful, that's what success is for you. So when I got into marriage, I could duplicate what I saw my father do.
Sure.
But what my father did for my mother didn't necessarily work for my wife.
100%.
And we didn't have conversations about this is why.
Sure.
Or here's what I'm actually doing. Here's my thought process. Here's how I felt when I was ready to get married.
Yeah.
We had a lot of we missed a lot of opportunities to have meaningful conversations where we could have celebrated lessons being passed versus common trauma. Your relationship with your father, what did you see him model that showed up in you in preparation for marriage as you was going through this process?
Mhm.
You mentioned that he passed with some things in him that there were things in him that weren't communicated to you.
Mm.
So you've taken on that, not burden, but it has opened your eyes to the need to actually get these things out. What was the dynamics like in terms of becoming a man based on the relationship that you have with your father?
So my relationship with my father as a man was not the best relationship.
Mm.
Right. So our relationship, me as a man, having a relationship with my father, it was almost non-existent. Right. It was not, or if it was existent, it wasn't healthy for many years.
Mm.
Right. Um, I would say that sometimes who we become is a direct result of seeing a parent that we don't want to become.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying?
Yeah.
So I think for me, my desire to be married and wanting to do it the right way had something to do with the fact that I saw, um, you know, in latter years it being done the wrong way.
Yeah.
Um, Now, with that being said, for many years, my dad was a great father. He was a great husband, and so I think because of that, I believed in marriage because I saw that model in the home.
Yeah.
Um, then I also believe that a part of wanting to get married, especially when you're young, has to do with your beliefs around marriage
Sure.
as well,
Yeah.
right? So it has to do with you know not wanting to sin indefinitely, right? Like, yo, at some point, I gotta grow up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Commit and do things,
Yeah.
essentially the
As
right
God would
way.
have. Right.
You feel what I'm saying?
Church kid guilt.
Yeah, no, hundred
Yeah.
percent. So, I mean, I saw that in my dad. I saw that in my dad. Of course, by the time I was born, they were already married. But I saw a man early on that just try to do things, the right way.
What changed in your relationship with your father? I know for me, I went through a stage where I didn't want his information.
Mm,
He wasn't going to force the information on me. He's old school, right? His
mm,
dad didn't really talk to him. It was I provide,
mm,
stay in the child's place. And then
yeah.
he lost his dad as he became a man. So somewhere around 2021, he lost his father. So he never had a father as a man,
Mm,
as an adult.
mm,
I realized that a lot later, but somewhere around 14, 15, 16 specifically because I started driving. I would time when my dad was coming home. Now I'd make sure I had all my chores, whatever I had to do, my responsibilities. I wasn't crazy, right? I still needed a place to live. But I was putting space between me and him, and the wedge just naturally got bigger. No real beef. We didn't square up. I didn't see him do something that I didn't like. I just didn't like his rules.
Yeah.
If you're open to peeling those pages back, what changed?
There were so many different things. And we could spend a large amount of time on this, right?
I mean, it could be part twos and threes, you know.
But there were a couple of things. And it's so funny because I just told you earlier on in our conversation that one of the things that I believe I'm pioneering is accountability. So let's take it back to the connection between how things begin to fall apart between me and my dad. Had a lot to do with the fact that he wasn't accountable. So that was one major thing. For instance, I'll give you an example, right? I just came back from Philly yesterday morning. And when I was in Philly, I was there with my mom for a wedding. And we were in the car. I was driving to a particular location. I was talking to her about my dad. And for the first time, I found out that he actually admitted to her that he was unfaithful to her in the marriage. At one point, I was like, "Mom, really?" I said, "That's crazy because for years he denied it with me and my sister, right? Lack of accountability. So he wasn't necessarily accountable to us. Maybe he was accountable to her at one stage, but he was never he wasn't really accountable to us. And then there were some things that he did, in terms of like betrayal when it came to me and my sister that affected our relationship long term. Thankfully, last 2 to 3 years of his life, we were able to reconcile. I was actually with him the day he died,
Wow.
So thankfully we were able to reconcile. But yeah, those things put a strain on our relationship for sure.
You were with him the day that he died. Was it a long-term illness, or was there some expectation that his health was deteriorating or his condition was?
His health was declining, but he was stable. So I had seen him 3 weeks prior to him actually passing. I had seen him for Father's Day. I went to go visit him, and he was pretty much like bedridden, but he was stable. Like, there was no expectation that he was going to pass away. And then all of a sudden things kind of took a turn for the worse. And
yeah,
so we got a call from his wife. Things are not looking well. You guys may want to come and visit him. So we got in the car and we were there the next day, and we were with him the day he died. Yeah.
What was he in a condition to have any meaningful conversations in the last moments or the last phase of a period, weeks?
Yeah, no, he wasn't. So I hadn't had a meaningful conversation with my dad probably in like the last 2 years of his life. He had a series of strokes that took away his ability to actually talk.
Wow.
So last 2 years of his life, it was kind of just like, we're going to visit him and be present, and we could talk to him, but it was really hard to understand what he was saying to us.
Yeah. What was or has been the grieving process?
Yeah.
To process that.
Yeah. So I think for us, the interesting thing about grief is that sometimes it doesn't feel the way that you think it's going to feel, So in my grieving, I think I may grieve it a little bit differently than my sister grieves it. My sister, still cries sometimes, and thinking about our dad. I think for me, in my grief, I tend to just think about the good times. Ironically enough, right? I kind of sit and just think about the times when we were younger and things were a little bit more simple. And when he was a very present father and, the ideal husband, I tend to think about those times and I actually get joy when I think about that. So I guess that's probably my way of kind of just processing through everything and kind of grieving his loss is just thinking about a good time.
Do you think that maybe in the process of the relationship being frayed, maybe you had, and I don't know how long that was between the relationship going sour and to the point where he could no longer communicate as effectively. But did that space allow you time to process, get over is a bad word, so forgive me, a bad phrase, but to make sense of maybe any potential resentment you had or any issues that, like, did you grow through it in that space of time to where when he did pass, you were at an emotional point where you kind of grieved the loss of the relationship or the change in the relationship, and you decided to focus on the good?
Yeah, I would say the thing that caused me to reconcile his shortcomings was understanding mine. Once you've been married and you've failed in that marriage, um, now the things that you judge your father for, you're now able to understand a little bit more because you've now walked in his shoes, um, in a sense.
Yeah. You understand his shoes, whether you walk them or not.
Yeah, you understand it, right?
Yeah,
So one of the things that helps us not to judge people is us putting ourselves in the shoes of the people that we're judging, right? To try to understand their perspective. So I had a lot more grace from my dad once I had my own failures.
yeah,
Didn't necessarily excuse some of the things that were done, but you begin to understand, like my dad's dad died when he was 7. So he didn't have a man in his house to actually groom him to be a man. So everything that he became as a man, he came through trial. He became through trial and error. And then you think about the fact that he got married when he was 19. If I would have got married when I was 19, I probably would have, messed some things up as well
disaster.
because I'm so young,
Yeah,
but I'm so ambitious to do the right thing that I may have gotten myself into something prematurely. And now the man that I am at 30 versus 19 is totally different. My desires are changing. My curiosity is peaking. Um, really in your 30s, life expectancy is like 70. So really in your 30s, you're going through your midlife crisis, right? So as I begin to process through my own failures, it caused me to take a step back to begin to process through his journey.
yeah.
And I think that that's what caused me to have more grace for my dad.
So the genesis of this show is me coming to the realization somewhere around 39, 40, everything changed, that my oldest son was at the age I was when I started rejecting information from my dad, right? Or not rejecting it, because he you can't exactly turn away from my dad and in his house and that be okay, right? But you can kind of tune him out. And I was so hell bent on making life different for him. Like, we think about the basketball thing, what the restrictions were, what religion denied me because of the practice in my mind, that I wanted to go all the way to the opposite end. And I ended up not parenting effectively.
Mm.
It's more like, be cool. Just let things happen, let her figure it out. And that was a disservice. So it's, dear son, what I wish my father told me, right? So what we didn't discuss, what I wish we discussed sooner, and what things, thankfully, my dad is still alive, that we're discussing now. But I want the timeline to be very different for all of my children, but
Mm.
specifically in the vein of dear son.
Mm.
What are some critical things that you wish your father told you?
There's some things that I wish my dad would have taught me. So my dad was a pastor. I know a lot about the Bible. I know a lot about religion. I was just having this conversation earlier today. There are some practical life things um, that I didn't get from my dad that I wish I would have gotten. Like, I wish he would have taught me to change a tire. You know what I'm saying? Now he taught me how to tie a tie, but that fits in line with
Being a
being
pastor?
presentable to go to church,
Right.
right? But there's just some practical things. Me and my dad, we didn't really talk about sex. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I learned that somewhere else. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like there were some things that we just, he didn't teach me about women. I learned about women. I mean, that's a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah.
Like I learned about women on my own. Now thankfully I was, thankfully I was adept enough to gather the information I need to gather. But there's some things about life, man,
Yeah.
that I wish that he would have taught me.
Yeah. You referenced some people grow up in a house and they see a parent be a certain way and they hard left or hard right, or they mimic it. It's not really a lot of in between, in my opinion. Like you
Sure,
kind of double down on what you've seen, or you know you don't want to be that. So you put your focus on not being that,
sure,
right? Sometimes to the detriment. We want to be so we want to show them that we're different than them
sure,
and we are okay despite or in spite.
sure.
I've realized that some of my parenting style has been more rooted in revenge and resentment,
Mm,
right? So I've been thinking through this theory of revenge parenting. How much of your decision to be right, to do right, to tap into this masculine vulnerability um, concept, theory, principle is showing people in your past that in spite of I'm going to be this, and how much of it is natural, genuine desire to just be
yeah,
better.
I think that most of it comes from a place that says that this is necessary for my emotional well being and the emotional well being of the people around me. You
Mm,
know, and so I think for me, it's not really even for other people, right? Like it's mostly for me.
yeah,
You know, because I want to be the best version of a man that I can be. You know, now I will say that um, seeing my parents' marriage fall apart caused me to go on a journey before I got married that said, marriage is not really important right now
mm,
until it became important to me. Right. So I will say that some of that was kind of like you know, um, hey, I'm going to do the complete opposite because y'all got married young and the marriage didn't work out. So for me, like, there's no need for me to get married super young because there's a possibility that it won't work out. So I might as well have some fun,
yeah,
within this time frame, and then decide to get married when I feel like I'm ready. Right?
yeah. Did your respect for the institution of marriage waver? I get that you realized you wanted to do it later and not as soon, but did what you saw of your parents' marriage um, falling apart, did it change your respect for the institution of marriage? Because you said they were church leaders, your dad was a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
and not that that makes them immune to the problems of the world. We're still in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right?
100%. I think it did. I think it did momentarily.
Okay.
I think that there was a period of time where it's just like, man, like marriage is the furthest thing from my
Just bump
mind.
that.
Like, yeah, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then I came to a space where I felt like, you know what, I need to be married.
Let's pull that thread because saying that on the surface, if I were to explain that to my wife as part of the reason we got married, it wouldn't go over so well. What does that mean? Like, how do I get it completely, what you're saying?
Sure,
But if this were a clip,
sure,
I could understand how people may or may not react. But
sure,
I need to get married? What does that mean for you when you say it?
sure. I think for me, it meant that I'm done playing the field.
Mm,
That I need to hone in. I need to focus. I need to become lean when it comes to how I'm spending my time, how I'm spending my energy, how I'm spending my resources.
yeah,
I need to grow up a little bit in this particular area of my life. Again, hindsight is 2020. That is not a healthy reason to get married,
right.
right? But that was my line of reasoning at the time. And so, you look back on it and you say, man, like if I could do that one over again, I probably would choose a different reason.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? To get married. But that was my line of reasoning at the time. And I acknowledge at this stage of my life that was not a healthy reason to get married, but that's the mind frame that I was in.
I think your explanation is going to help folks, because knowing the why and acknowledging how that has evolved over time, I think is important, because marriage doesn't fix. Getting married doesn't end the phase of your life that you didn't want to end for any other reason.
And it didn't. It did, right? Maybe it ended it momentarily, right? Ended it for a few years.
Yeah.
You know? And then when I got to a space in the marriage where the marriage was not enjoyable for me, that phase that I came out of resurfaced, but at an inopportune, inappropriate time.
Yeah.
Right. So getting married doesn't resolve an issue in you that's unresolved.
It doesn't even mask it.
Right.
It's not a Band-Aid for it.
Yeah. So you have to make peace with whatever that is prior to getting into marriage. If not, then you carry that into the marriage, and that's when it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you want to be married again?
I do.
Why?
I think that marriage is a beautiful thing, and I actually think that I was created to be married. And I see the benefit of a man and a woman committing their lives to each other, and assisting each other when it comes to reaching destiny. Right? There's some things that can only be done when two people join forces and pace towards getting that done. So I want to get that done with somebody I love.
Do you think that a whole phase is important or necessary?
I can give you the politically correct answer, and I can you know.
What'd you come here for? You came here to be political, or what we doing?
Do I think that the whole phase is necessary
or important?
I don't think it's necessary. I don't necessarily think that it's important. I think that there are healthy marriages that have two people that didn't experience that whole phase, right? I do understand that without a whole phase, there's going to be extreme curiosity that must be tempered within that marriage.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
So we weren't virgins when we got married. Speaking for my household. And the more I mature, I understand the logic of having a single partner for life. Because every experience creates an expectation for the next experience.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're experiencing a multitude of different people, sometimes you find yourself looking for all of those experiences in your forever mate. And there's a constant, whether it's conscious or unconscious, comparison to what this experience is from my last experience with this person, and also all the other people that you may have had experiences with. So it complicates things.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a perch to sit on and judge people, but I understand the logic and the psychological relief that limiting your partners, especially having one to learn and grow with, right? Because anybody that says, well, how will they know? Well, neither one of you would know if you were just learning each other.
100%.
Right? And this is hindsight.
Maybe
this is dad D. Johns. This is not 1920.
Yeah.
But I kind of get it. do you think, like, how do you approach this next season of pursuing that? Like, what's important to you? Not what is your perfect partner, because I don't want anybody, they already in your DMs, but I don't want nobody. It's like, yo, you the plug? No, 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 no. But like, what things do you value differently now in this phase than you did when you thought you were ready to get married?
So, so in answering this question, I guess I would be giving away,
No.
a little bit of,
I mean, character can't be fake. People can present, but if you're talking about character traits, that's
yeah, 100%. I think for me, um, what I look for at this stage in my life has a lot to do with who the person is inherently,
mm,
right? So I'll give you an example, right? I pay attention to how somebody treats somebody that can do nothing for them. Janitors, waitresses, because that lets me know that you either value or don't value human beings,
mhm.
right? Regardless of what status they are in life, right? Um, what happens if I lose everything tomorrow? I know that if that person respects the janitor and the waitress, then even if I lose everything tomorrow, they'll still respect me because it's more about interpersonal respect, right? As opposed to respect based upon status. Um, I pay attention to the things that are important to them,
Mm.
and I identify whether those things are important to me as well, right? Not somebody who listens to what's important to me and then they morph into that because they know it's important to me. I really pay attention to what's important to them inherently,
Yeah.
and I identify if that aligns with what's important to me. I wish that I would have known to do that years ago.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the reference to had you gotten married at 19 or 20 as your parents did, that version of you and the 30-year-old version of you are very different, right? What I know to be true is the 30-year-old version of you and the 35-year-old version of you are different. And the 40-year-old version of you would be different. And the 45-year-old version would be different.
Mm,
So as you evolve, your partner has to choose to accept every version of you.
mhm.
Do you think you're prepared and have you matured to the point where you're willing to accept every version of your partner from inception to death do you part?
Yeah, for sure. I think it depends on the version.
How so? And I'm going to preface this because we've talked about how you've grown and how you've matured, the work that you've done. So my assumption, and walk me back if I'm wrong, is that you are more astute at picking or being open to who God says your forever partner
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
So there's that.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think it's quite possible for someone to become a version of themselves that their partner may not appreciate.
And then what?
Depends on the magnitude of that version. Okay,
Revol-
now, okay,
I'm putting a stop in
yeah,
the revolving
no,
door.
no,
I'm
no.
putting the wedge in.
Yeah, yeah, no. So here's the deal, right? Um, marriage is supposed to be forever. Okay. The vow that we make to God in front of witnesses is for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so forth and so on. So, based upon those vows, regardless of the version or how it morphs, how they morph, we're supposed to stick by them for better or for worse. So,
Abuse aside.
say it again.
Said abuse aside. That's me speaking. I'm not speaking for you.
I feel you. No, I feel you. I feel you. That is the tension that exists. That's the reason why I said it depends on the how that version, because I do believe that that although we make that vow to God, that there are certain scenarios that mm, we all would probably agree
Yeah.
are scenarios or versions that might be deal breakers, right?
Yeah.
But I would say for the most part, yeah. I mean, um, 95%, you work through it.
Yeah.
You work through it.
So
So
what's one of your deal breakers?
so you talked about physical abuse.
Mhm. Not abuse.
Okay, you
Yeah.
did. You said
Yeah.
abuse, right?
Yeah.
I think abuse is a deal breaker,
Gotcha.
and abuse is not just physical. There's verbal abuse.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying, and the impact that can have on people. Understanding that words are literally creative forces, right? And so how we use those words can build or destroy someone literally.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I would say abuse is one of those. Um, I think that's a major one.
What's the biggest benefit of your journey from then to now as it relates to your pursuit of understanding masculine vulnerability? Part B, or rephrasing it. No, no, no. That's part A. Part B is the people that knew you then that still know you now. What do they say about you? But I want to understand what you say about you first.
The people that understood me then, when you say then,
That's all your journey, right?
that's all my
There's
journey.
people that you met that maybe through the journey, I would imagine that when people get divorced, some people pick sides.
100%.
Some our friends that were your friends first go back to being your friends,
Yeah,
right? And my friends sometimes they pick the other side.
yeah.
But those that saw you then to now,
Yeah.
what would they say? But I really want to know what you say about you first, because that's what matters.
Um,
What's been the aha? What's been the why has it been worth it?
why has it been worth it? What I would say is that I'm a man evolved. Obviously, I don't wish divorce on anyone,
Mm,
right? So, divorce aside, the journey from divorce to now has been a necessary one,
mm-hmm.
and it's been a journey that has created a version of a man that probably those that knew me before don't recognize,
Yeah,
right? So, with that being said, those people may say a few different things. They may say they may see me as inauthentic, right? Because they know the version of me that they know at
yeah,
that stage of my life. Um, and then there are those that applaud the journey because they've actually walked with me through it. So there are two sets of people. Um, there are people who knew me then and jumped off the journey with me, right? Based upon that season of my life. And so they actually didn't walk with me from that point to this point.
mm-hmm.
And so those people may have, a limited perspective of who I am because they didn't get a chance to, they didn't take the time or didn't choose to walk that journey. And then there are those that knew me then, walked with me on the journey, and they know me now. Those people would say that Nate has done the work to become the man that he is today.
Yeah,
The Dre's, you know what I'm saying? And the people who um, were committed to being in a relationship, you know, even when they didn't understand
yeah,
the journey.
yeah. Do you want children?
I do.
If you could pick the mix, what would it be?
Um, I love to have a boy and a girl.
What would your provided that it works out that way? What what um what are the things that you want to ensure that he knows based on your journey?
My son to know that it's okay to to express. I want my son to know that it's okay to make mistakes and daddy's going to be here.
Yeah.
Right? Regardless of what those mistakes are. I would want my son to understand that it's okay to be honest, even when you're afraid of the outcome. And that daddy won't judge.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And daddy is here to help you walk through whatever that failure is. You know what I'm saying? I'll sit in that failure with you. You know what I'm saying? And I would want him to understand that vulnerability is beautiful. Even for a man.
Especially for a man.
Yeah.
It's dope, man. Well,
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate your vulnerability on this discussion. Some things that things I'd like to get to in another conversation. The time is far spent. But let's end it on a bit of a lighter note. What you have going on? I know you have some digital products. I know you have some offerings, and like I said, the people, unless you've been under a rock, I don't know how you haven't seen Nate in the past 3 to 6 months, 3 to 8 months, 6 to 8 months or so. What do you have going on that how the people can engage with you, understand your offerings further?
Yeah, a couple things. So, I offer one-on-ones with people, right? Where we can sit down and talk through whatever they're going through. People ask me, "Are you a therapist?" No, I'm not a therapist, right?
Disclaimer.
I'm right. I'm a guy who has gone through his own journey,
right,
and has learned a lot along the way. Also learned from the experiences of other people. So, I offer one-on-ones. I'll actually be doing some group coaching here coming up as well. And then I have a 28-day self-love journal that people can download from natewithlove.com.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? Where they can kind of process through, their own pain. Yeah.
Where's this going? Like you're championing what I would call a movement, or movement is kind of trite, but the words escape me. Where do you see it going? Like, what is the ultimate goal, or are you just in the moment, enjoying the moment for what it is?
Yeah. I'll tell you that, today, and every day I'm taking it one day at a time, but I can really see myself being a thought leader in this space around this topic. And traveling and inspiring groups of people to embrace masculine vulnerability.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I love to teach men around this subject, and to be an example. So, poster child, maybe.
You consider doing a podcast?
Say it again.
Have you considered doing a podcast?
That is funny. I mean, I'm sitting with the greatest podcast producer right now.
What you doing?
So yeah, we filmed.
Hot seat. You said, "Do I have rapid fire?" That's your rapid fire question. When is episode 1 dropping?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's put it out. You got about 2 weeks before this drops.
I was just about to say we're gonna get it done within the next 2 weeks. I was just about to say that we're gonna get it done within the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
We got 4 episodes? In the chamber right now.
Yeah.
So we'll get episode 1 edited and.
Commitment.
Yeah.
Accountability.
2 weeks. 2 weeks we'll drop the first one. It's a vulnerable one too.
Accountability. And so I won't date it specifically, but it's close to July 2023.
Let's see. Look,
we're gonna be accountable.
Look, it's June 28th.
He said it. There it is.
So by July, let's just say by July 12th.
About the 14th.
All right, by July 14th, it'll be done. Yeah. My dad's birthday.
I know.
That's crazy.
It's my son's birthday too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get it done. For sure.
Yeah. Dope, man. Again, I appreciate you coming on the platform, contributing in the past. Definitely a supporter. I appreciate it. You have a large platform, so I know that is a responsibility and you don't take it lightly. So I respect that. Definitely rooting for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
How about that? Rooting for you.
I appreciate it.
And I know there's nothing but great things on the horizon, man.
Appreciate it.
Listeners and viewers, have you done the necessary? Have you liked? Have you subscribed? Have you followed the show on the audio platforms? If you're on the audio platform, there's a link to the video. Do both. It helps the algorithm. Let us be great. Turn on your auto downloads. The podcast will be waiting for you on your device whenever you're ready to get to it. Um, I've enjoyed myself. Looking forward to seeing the trajectory of this rocket ship that you're on. And I know it's going to be great. That's going to do it for this episode. We appreciate you guys. God bless you. Peace. Good?
Yeah, how do I look?
Huh?
How do I look?
Oh, man. Should have asked me 30 minutes ago. Should have asked. No, you good.
All right.
Everything good, man.
Cool, cool.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I just pull it out and count for nothing when I'm feeling great. Give my baby